Hello, Fear Seekers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, allegedly true, demon horror stories. Now, it is a dream of mine to read subscriber horror stories someday. With that in mind, I'd ask that you subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can make that happen together. If you have any scary stories you'd like to share, check out the links in the description. I would be honored to read them. Now, without further ado, sit back, hold your crucifixes close, and get ready to ferment your fears. I never really believed in the paranormal or supernatural. I always thought the stories about people being haunted or possessed were just stories made up for entertainment, or cases of severely mentally ill patients being misunderstood by fanatical priests claiming demonic possession. I never suspected that they were actually real, but when I was 13, my naive brain would be put in its place. It was the summer of 2007. Life was good. I had a pretty normal teenage life. I had a few friends my age who lived in the same neighborhood as me, and we would do a lot of outdoor activities like hiking, mountain biking, and fishing. We lived just north of the Ozark Mountains in a nice little town in Arkansas. My father had worked very hard to give us all a good life. He came from a poor family and joined the military at 18 to better his future, and it paid off. He got a good job working on airplanes, and we moved to the country. My parents got a steal on a really nice old house in the village. It was a nice little community built into the woods, which had golf courses, private lakes and trails, and its own shopping center with a harps and a couple of restaurants. We were a happy, normal, middle-class family. That is, until that thing showed up and ruined our lives. There were a lot of local legends about the natives that used to inhabit the area. Supposedly, our entire community was built on top of sacred land. I used to walk the trails near my house a lot, and you could find cliffs and overhangs with Indian paintings on the walls and remnants of their civilization. I always felt bad about how they were driven from their homes by my ancestors, but I was still grateful for my home and wonderful life. The kids at school would often scare each other by telling tales of shamans, summoning skinwalkers and rakes, and that to this day they still haunt the woods at night, looking for a midnight snack. I always laughed it off. Ghosts and monsters aren't real, they're just made up stories to scare kids. I always thought the ghost hunter shows were ridiculous. You wouldn't hear or see anything on camera, but the people in the show would jump at a creek in the night, and suspenseful music would play while the camera focused on empty darkness. Those shows can be fun for the imagination, but the reality of paranormal entities is much more terrifying. They can tear apart families and bring your whole world crashing down. I would learn this dark reality one summer night. The air was cool. I had my window open and could hear the wind flowing through the leaves. The cicadas reverberating through the midnight woods put me in a sleepy trance. I relaxed and drifted off to sleep. In such a peaceful place, I was completely safe. I always felt one with the woods. It really is beautiful here. Cradled in the sounds of nature, I drifted deep into sleep. Then, a wave of panic. I feel every hair stand up, chills down my spine. I feel the eyes of someone on me. I can feel their sinister intent. Every fiber in me is telling me to run. There is something here that wants to kill me. No, worse. It wants to own me, to see me suffer, It has been watching me for a long time. I have been chosen. I can't breathe. Help me, I scream. Mom! I hear laughter. Not human, not a physical voice. Multiple voices of all octaves laughing at once. I can't open my eyes. I can't breathe or talk, but I see its eyes. Blue, bloodshot, bulging eyes. Huge pupils. Red is filling my mind. I feel pressure. My entire body is vibrating, and I feel like I'm going to explode. I gasp as I fully awaken. But as I open my eyes, I freeze. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Through my open door, I can see something laying on our living room couch. It's clearly visible, but clearly not a person. It's like a shadow, but flowing. The moonlight illuminates its face, a skull with a sinister smile. It has those same eyes from my dream, huge, bulging, wide-open eyes. Crystal blue pupils. It's staring at me, smiling. It's awkwardly sprawled out on the couch, and its shadowy body, like a translucent but pitch-black cloak, flows as if underwater. I'm getting chills just typing this, and I want to be clear that this is not a fictional story. This really happened. I was so scared I was frozen. I felt electricity going up and down my spine, through my brain. My eyes were wide and watering. My mouth hung open. It stared into my eyes, into my mind, for what felt like hours. It then quickly shifted out of sight. It darted down the couch and into the shadows. Adrenaline hit me and I ran into my parents' room. I burst open the door, panting and covered in sweat. My parents were at first annoyed, and it was the typical thing parents do when something like this happens. But as I described every detail about my encounter, and when they saw how terrified I was, I started to see a look of unease and fear in my father's eyes. He was scared. He believed me. My father, being a devout Christian, believed in demons, and he was convinced I had just been tormented, and that I was in danger. He was very serious, and I could see that he was disturbed by what had just happened. He woke up my little sister, and the whole family gathered in the living room. I wish my dad had never done what he did next. He got out his Bible and turned the pages to a verse. I don't quite remember the actual verse, but it was something about casting out demons. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave my family alone," he yelled angrily, cursing the demon. "If you want one of us, take me. Leave my family alone." We sat in the living room, talking well into the night, and after a while we were all tired and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep, though. I couldn't forget those eyes, its evil smile, the way it moved. It was disturbing. Fast forward a few months and things were normal. Me and my sister went back to school, and for the most part I had forgotten all about the demon. I even convinced myself it was a bad dream or even sleep paralysis, even though that was the only time sleep paralysis had ever happened to me. I went on with my life, until we got the worst news I had ever heard to this day. My dad was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer, and it had spread. He was dying. We were devastated. I hugged my father and cried all day that day. I couldn't believe I was going to lose my dad. He was always so strong and seemed very healthy. The weird thing is, and the doctors were also puzzled by this, his cancer was usually only found in teenagers. It was a cancer that almost 100% of the time was only found in boys in their early teens. This shocked me and made me feel guilty. The whole experience of the demon became prominent in my mind, and I remembered my father's words to the demon. I think it had its eye on me, but went after my dad instead. I wish it had taken me, though. My family would be much better off today if it had. My father remained positive through his sickness. He went to chemotherapy sessions, started eating healthier, and worked out as much as he could. With his bald head and amputated leg, people would often come up to him and thank him for his service. He always laughed and said thank you because he was a veteran. However, contrary to what people thought, his condition was much worse than if he had stepped on an IED. He lived for 3 more years, even though doctors said he had less than a year to live. He always stayed happy and positive, more for our sake than his own. But toward the end, he started to slowly deteriorate. It was awful. I couldn't do anything to help him. The man I looked up to, who protected us, who I always saw as invincible, was crumbling before me. He lost all his weight and started sleeping on the couch to not disturb my mom. He was so sick. He suffered so much. I would hear his death rattles and moans and want nothing more than to help him in any way I could. Something that disturbs me so much to this day is that I started to realize something. He more and more resembled the demon. He was getting so thin he looked like a skeleton, and he had very blue eyes. Sometimes he would just look at me from the couch and I would get chills. The demon had been mocking me, imitating what he would do to my father while viciously smiling, as if it was funny. This enrages me. How can something be so vile, so purely evil? My poor father soon died and left us a broken family. My mother fell into a deep depression. I looked after my little sister, tried to be the best father figure I could be, even though I was a poor substitute. We fell behind on the bills and the bank foreclosed our house. We lost everything. The next handful of years were a struggle, but now I'm an adult and have gotten some sort of a stable life. I recently figured out why my father was so shaken that night and didn't just blow it off as a bad dream. I visited my sister recently and we started talking about ghosts and the paranormal. I asked if she had ever seen anything like that, and she hesitated for a second but then told me. And what she said gave me the chills. She was very young the night I saw the demon, and had largely forgotten that night. But she told me she used to see a shadowy man standing at the end of her bed. He had a skull for a face. Demons are real. Attached to this post is a photograph of a house. From the outside, it seems to be average, nondescript. The kind of place that you'd likely find in any city or small town. It's not, though. This house is like something out of the Twilight Zone, or a Stephen King novel. You see, I lived in this house when I was 11 to 12 years old. That was 1993 to 94. My room was the one above the porch with the double window. My sister's room was across the hall. My mother and my brothers lived downstairs. During the time we lived there, strange things occurred. Some of them you may find hard to believe, and that's fine. I can only assure you that they actually happened. Some 26 years after the fact, I can provide you no evidence and only my solemn word that everything I'm about to tell you is the absolute truth. For starters, sometimes our clocks would run backwards for no discernible reason. We changed the batteries and checked them for defects, but nothing seemed to be amiss. They just randomly started running in reverse from time to time. There was also an issue with our basement. How do I describe this? I guess the best way would be to say that the basement seemed to be a portal to hell. We would hear strange noises coming from down there that couldn't be explained away as creaking pipes or the house settling on the foundation. Things like demonic growling, roaring. When someone had to go down there to do laundry, there was a sound like people whispering, and the whole area had an unsettling feel to it. We had this dog, a German Shepherd named Lassie. She was an exceptionally brave, loyal, and protective dog, but she would not go near the basement or the basement door. Eventually, she became so terrified that she ran away and never came back. There was also a night when we all woke up to find a big black crow, or raven, I'm not sure, in the house, flying madly around. This was in the ungodly hours of the morning, mind you, so no one would have been up to open a door or window to let it in. If you can even imagine an intelligent bird like a crow/raven willingly flying through an opening into a human dwelling like some kind of idiotic sparrow. There were no holes in the roof and no place for it to get in or out. Where did it come from and where did it go? I have no memory of us actually getting the bird out of the house, but I never saw it again. Then there was the man. At the back of the house was a hallway that led off the dining room and past the kitchen towards the lower floor bedrooms. The twins, mere toddlers at the time, had their nursery in the rearmost room on the left. They would sit back there and have conversations with someone that none of us could see. They referred to this person as simply the man. The man seemed to enjoy keeping the boys company, but he was anything but benign. One day, while the rest of us were at school, my mom had the twins in their high chairs, feeding them lunch. When she stepped away to do something, there was a crash and the sound of screaming. One of the twins was on the floor, his high chair tipped over. He'd bashed his head really hard. The high chairs had been secured on flat footing before she started. When she asked the other twin what had happened, he replied, "The man did it." My little brother ended up in the hospital in a coma for a long time. You might be happy to know that he survived and today is married with 2 beautiful daughters. But CPS didn't believe that my mother was innocent and began to stalk us. They would park across the street from our house and watch us. They would drop in unexpectedly. They were looking for a reason to take us and put us in foster care. This is how we ultimately ended up leaving the house. Rather than deal with any more tragedy or weirdness or stalking, we packed up what we could and moved across the country. What we couldn't take with us, we left behind. I asked my mother once, about 5 years before she died, if she'd ever actually seen the entity that the boys referred to as the man. She said she had, but only once. She said she was walking past the kitchen door one day and had caught sight of someone in her peripheral vision. A tall man wearing dark clothes, standing with his back to her, staring out of the kitchen window. When she turned to get a better look, he was gone. That house scared the crap out of all of us. There was always a feeling like we were being watched. Thankfully, it is many years and many miles behind us. When we left, there was no one to pay the mortgage, so the bank took possession. Because of this, today it is privately owned by people I don't know. For that reason, I will not disclose the location. I won't even tell you what state it's in. If you're ever unfortunate enough to stumble upon it, however, I advise you to keep walking. Because if you stop to take a look at this place, there's likely something you can't see staring back at you. This happened a couple months ago. My friend had heard that the northern lights might be visible in our area, and asked if I wanted to go for a drive out into the country to see if we could catch a glimpse. So we headed out after dark and drove for a few hours, just searching for a good vantage point. After a while, we started to give up on seeing the lights. My friend realized that we were close to her hometown and noted that she had been wanting to visit the local cemetery to find the graves of some of her distant relatives. She had recently been researching her genealogy. It was a clear, warm night, and we were both a little disappointed that we hadn't seen the lights. We both wanted to make the trip worthwhile, so we agreed to swing by the cemetery. We found the graves, took some photos, and just wandered around for a little while. I had been feeling increasingly anxious since we arrived, which struck me as odd. I have done several cemetery seriation projects as an archaeologist, and don't normally feel nervous in cemeteries, even at night. In fact, I usually find that cemeteries are pretty peaceful and calming. But I felt really strange in that cemetery, and found myself frequently spinning around because I felt like someone was standing behind me. Still, I just chalked it up to casual anxiety and tried not to dwell on it. One of the problems with having an anxiety disorder is that it's sometimes hard to tell when your nervousness is justified. Even in retrospect, I don't know if my anxiety was just in my head or if it was related to what would happen next. After wandering for a while, we realized that it was approaching 1 a.m. and that we should probably get back home. We headed toward the car. The car was in sight, and my friend was a few yards ahead of me when it happened. I suddenly got that nervous feeling again and thought that I heard someone running up behind me. I was starting to turn my head to look back when I felt something collide with my back, right between my shoulder blades. There was a weight behind it, as if someone had actually hurtled into me. The impact was so forceful that I was thrown forward and fell flat on my face, and as I scrambled to get back up, I felt the weight hitting me in the shoulders again and was shoved back down. I glanced up to see my friend running toward me. She had also heard someone running up to us, had heard my initial fall, and had turned just in time to see me being pushed back down. She would later tell me that she had seen my hoodie flattening against my back and shifting, as if someone had been pressing their hands against my shoulders. She grabbed my arm to pull me up. The weight disappeared, and we both bolted to the car. We jumped in and locked the doors. She immediately peeled out, and we sped away from the cemetery. We drove for several minutes without saying a word. I think we were both stunned, and more than anything, confused. She finally glanced at me and said, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't quite know how to answer that. I told her that someone had shoved me to the ground, and she said, "I know, I saw, but what was that? There was nobody there." We tried to come up with a rational explanation, but none of them made any sense. Had someone ambushed me and then bolted? Definitely not. We would have seen them. Had I tripped? No. I had definitely felt something pushing me, and my friend had seen me being shoved back down. Had it been the wind? Not possible. There hadn't been so much as a breeze that night, and if there had been some freak gust of wind, it would have hit my friend too. We just couldn't explain it. Neither of us had seen anything there. Whatever had pushed me, twice, it hadn't been visible. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed something else. My back hurt. Right between my shoulder blades, right where I had felt the impact, I could feel a sort of stinging, prickly sensation. It felt like my back had been brushed with stinging nettles. I mentioned this to my friend, and she insisted on pulling over to look at my back. She switched the hood light on and pulled the collar of my hoodie down to look. I heard her mutter, "What the hell?" She took a photo of my back and showed it to me. The skin between my shoulder blades was reddened, and several little blisters had started to appear. They later swelled up and popped. It was as if I had gotten a sunburn or a chemical burn. There weren't any scratches or anything. It was a subtle mark, but it was clearly there. We couldn't explain how I'd gotten burned. I hadn't touched my back, I hadn't rubbed against anything, and it hurt. It continued to sting for several days. You can see the photo here. I couldn't sleep that night. My back hurt, and every time I started to drift off, I'd suddenly sense that someone was standing over my shoulder and I would startle awake. I couldn't really understand what had happened at the cemetery, but it rattled me. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or demons, to be honest, but I know that something truly bizarre and frightening happened that night. It's been really difficult to come to terms with this. I already have PTSD from an actual assault, and there is something deeply unsettling about the fact that, in this instance, there is nothing I could have done to defend myself. It's been a major setback in my recovery from the previous trauma. I've had several odd nightmares since then. Dreams that are similar to the nightmares that I used to have as a kid/young adult. I don't know why, but for as long as I can remember, I've had dreams in which a creature is attempting to lure/woo me in one way or another, and in the dreams I usually understand this creature to be a devil or a demon. Sometimes it takes the form of an old woman. I had one dream when I was about 13 years old in which I was wandering through a forest. I came across a little cottage with this old woman standing by the porch. She beckoned me inside, and I acquiesced. We spent some time casually talking and baking cookies, but I felt uneasy around her and got the sense that she wanted something from me. At one point, I glanced out the window and noticed a group of people standing in the yard, calling out to the old woman. I asked who these people were, and I vividly remember what she told me. "They want me to take them in. But I don't want them. I want you." In other dreams, it had a more sinister appearance, but I always recognized it as the same creature. I sometimes have dreams in which it is sitting in the dark at my bedside, whispering to me. It has a shadowy appearance with long, lanky limbs and empty eye sockets. Its teeth are made of razor wire, and there is something like blood or wine gleaming on its lips. In those dreams, I can hear it whispering, but can't understand what it's saying. Sometimes I have dreams of the same creature sitting in a chair in the corner of my room, eating a rotten apple. I know these are just dreams, but I mention it because those dreams had subsided in my early 20s, but the incident at the cemetery rattled me so much that they've returned. It seems to have shaken my understanding of the world around me. In these new dreams, this creature is standing upright behind me at the cemetery. Time is standing still. I can see my friend frozen ahead of me, and the creature is whispering at my back. I don't know why my mind is conflating that creature with my encounter at the cemetery. Anyway, I just wanted to share this, because I have no idea what the hell happened that night. My friend believes it was a ghost, but I don't know. My specialty as an anthropologist is in religion and folklore, but I've never personally experienced anything like this. I really don't know what to do with it. Thanks for reading. When I was 15, my mom got really sick. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling or sleeping. She would eat like a toddler, picking at things with her fork. We didn't know what was wrong with her, but eventually, since she would barely eat and was becoming more of a recluse, my dad took her to the ER. She came home and went to a specialist the next day. My dad picked us up early that day and took us home, not sharing what happened until we got home. My mom had stage 3 terminal cancer in multiple areas of her body. She had been completely fine 3 months before. We went on with our lives as we all worked through this with my mom. I had my own experiences with this demon thing, but I'll save those for another time. Our pastor told us he had friends who ran a Pentecostal church a couple hours away, and that maybe he could help us as he had tried everything he could. We decided to make the drive since we didn't have anything else to lose. This preacher knew we had arrived, despite not knowing what we looked like, our names, nor when we were coming. So shortly after we sat down together in a pew, he asked my mom to step forward. We all stood and followed her up to the front of this church with 200 people staring at us. My sister and I were taken to one side of the altar by 2 older women, and my mom, dad, preacher, and 9 or 10 other people were opposite of us. They started talking to my mom, and up until now I had no idea why we were here. The 2 women were talking with us, their arms around our shoulders. I heard over their voices, growling, screaming, and profanities being spewed into the air by someone. It sounded like my mom's voice, but like she was using something to distort it. I looked at my mom for a moment, only to realize I wasn't looking at my mom. Yes, same hair, clothes, height, and weight. It was my mom, but something had taken her over. I could see it. Her face was distorted as if something was trying to escape her. Her eyes were very, very dark, despite being bright blue any other time. Her smile was large and unnatural for her face. In that moment, I realized it was my mom making all those terrible sounds. Finally, it seemed the darkness that had taken over our lives was gone. My mom was sitting near the altar. I walked over, hugged her, and sat down next to her. We talked for a few minutes, my dad and sister coming to join us. People were leaving, and as we were getting our things together, the preacher and his family came to invite us to dinner. That night, my mom ate a large pizza, salad, an order of 8 wings, and breadsticks all on her own. It was the most she had eaten in a year. The next day, Monday, my mom went to be seen to check the progression of her cancer. That day, she found out every single speck of cancer was no longer plaguing her body. She was as healthy as she was before this all started. We haven't had an issue since then, and I'm 27 now. The demon who made himself known as Seth tortured my mom for years before this incident, coming in and out of her life. Hopefully he's gone for good. Hey guys, glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Have you ever had a run-in with a malevolent presence? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have any scary stories you'd like to share, be sure to send them in. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.
He's not dead.